Hi friends, this is Tina and welcome to my new video. I'm so excited to share you my new bullet journal setup for the year 2022, but before we get into that, let's see what notebook I chose for the new year. I haven't used Arteza and Olive in a while, so I chose their plant-based Bride collab notebook with beautiful green linen cover with an olive branch design. Plant-based Bride was one of the first bullet journal channels I started following, so I thought why not start the year with one of my favorite creators. This notebook has 160 pages with 160 GSM paper thickness, but obviously it's a lot different from my last notebook that had watercolor paper, so it took a little while to get used to this paper. By the way, I am an Arteza and Olive affiliate, so if you want to get anything from them, you can always use my code TINA10 for 10% off your whole order. I also get a small commission every time you use my code or link, and they are always also listed in the description down below. I started off by writing my name on the first page and then flipped to the next spread. I actually skipped the first page of this notebook because they usually don't open fully due to the glue, so I just started creating my 2022 cover page on the next spread. For my new bullet journal theme, I decided to paint some daisies, so I definitely went for a more summery theme even though it's winter for me. I wanted to say that this whole theme, and especially the cover page, is inspired by Shada Campbell's tutorials here on YouTube. I wanted to paint some loose leaves and then make some more simple flowers with fine liners, and I ended up finding a great tutorial from her. I didn't follow the tutorial from the beginning to the end, but I still really got inspired by that, so I will definitely link her channel in the description along with that exact video. Shada is definitely one of the best watercolor artists to follow here on YouTube if you want to learn new things. So I started by sketching out my cover page where I created this almost bouquet style arrangement. I added only 4 flowers here in the cover page, and if you want to do that too, maybe just create some circles with pencil first to mark the placement for your flowers so you know where to add them later with your fine liner. I drew my flowers in different angles so it would look a bit more interesting. Only one of these flowers was pictured opened straight forward, and I drew most of them in an angle facing the sides more. Next, I took my 02 Pigma Micron and just drew the outlines for the flowers and drew them in this relaxed style. I drew some dots at the center part of the flower. I actually don't know what it's called, but this was just to create a bit of shadows, and that's why I only drew them to the left side. I also drew some messy lines for the roots of the petals, and that's pretty much all the shading I did for my flowers. I felt like making some loose watercolor leaves in the background would balance the spread out nicely, so that's just what I did here. This time I actually took my olive green yellowish watercolor tube from Schminke and mixed some more yellow and brown to use as the color for the leaves. Here's definitely where I noticed how different it actually is to use watercolor in this notebook compared to my last one. I got no bleed through even though I used quite a lot of layers and water, but the colors definitely don't blend or mix so smoothly. I had to wait and add more color once the first layers dried since the water created this pooling effect on some parts of the leaf. But yeah, I used a super simple leaf shape and just painted them all over the background behind the daisies. I noticed you definitely don't need to be careful or precise when painting these. For me, they look super messy and random, and I think it looks good like that. After I painted the first layer for the leaves, I wanted to paint the center part of the flower. For this, I took Winsor And Newton Cotman watercolors in shades cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, and burnt umber. I mixed them together and added a spot to that color to the same area as where I drew those dots earlier, and then just took water to my brush and added it to the whole area to get more transparent and lighter look on the right side. I felt like the leaves still looked a bit plain, so I took some darker green to darken the root of the leaf. With the same color, I also painted some faint veins to the leaves, leaving a couple of them without it. I also painted the stems of the flowers with the same green paint. You might wonder why I chose to paint flowers for my theme in the winter time, and I actually tried to come up with some more winter appropriate ideas too, but nothing that came to my mind gave me that happy and good feeling. I also thought that even though I'm creating this while it's winter for me, I'm still going to flip back to these pages multiple times during these 6 months I'm using my journal, so I don't think it has to match the season I'm in right now. I love painting flowers and just looking at them, so I think this is a perfect way to start this year and my new bullet journal, and I'm sure I will enjoy looking at this any time of the year. Also, I think this perfectly fits with my new pretty green notebook. The only painting I did for the petals of the flowers was that I took the smallest amount of black watercolor mixed into a lot of water and added some of that paint to the root of the petals where I drew those lines before. If you paint this yourself, just make sure not to make this color too black because then you obviously can't go back and make it lighter easier. Lastly, I used my white Gelly Roll pen to cover any of those spots where I had painted over the petals with green paint. When this was done, I went to the right page where I created my key page. This cover page is still not done though, but I will come back to it once the other page is done. I used a lot of this brown paper in my setup. I think it worked perfectly with the colors of my painting. I cut this piece of the paper and glued it in. Like I said, I'm making my keys in this page, but I have to say I don't need my key page at all. I always use circle for my tasks and exclamation mark for events, and I never refer back to this page. I still like to include this in my setups because I like how it looks and it always kind of completes the setup nicely. I added the word key in the upper side of the glued paper, and I like that it was half on the white page and on the brown paper. In this setup, I used two fonts for my headers, and this is a serif style one. I also used my normal cursive on some of my headers. I loved how I made my headers in my 2021 half-year bullet journal setup, so I definitely wanted to keep the same style here. I used the same font and outlined all of them with my white gel pen. I think I would love to buy a new white gel pen that has a thinner nib because for me the thinner Gelly Rolls haven't worked at all, so please leave your recommendations below if you have any. I made a couple of mistakes here when I was making my keys. I forgot one of the most important ones, which is task done, and I also wrote one of the keys in the wrong spot and off-centered. It doesn't really matter in the end anyway, since like I said, this is not a very useful page for me. Now that we are done with my key page, I went back to the left page and made a hole to both sides of the stems. Then I took my jute ribbon and pushed it through the paper from the other side of the page. I made a double knot and cut the ribbons shorter. Also, even though there's a double knot, it doesn't feel too thick when you turn the page, or it's not too hard to write on top of. I cut this piece of the same brown paper almost like a gift tag. I wrote the year 2022 to the paper and put the ribbon through the hole in the paper. Last thing I did was putting some glue to the ends of the string to glue them in place. You don't need to glue it, but I wanted to do it so the tag wouldn't move around too much. But that's my first spread all done, and we still have a bunch more to set up, so let's go to the next page. I always have my future log on the second spread of my setup, and that's what I'm doing here too. I have now used the same style for my future log for 3 times, and I don't think I will ever do anything different because this works for me so well. So I always make one spread future log, and I create 2 long columns where I paint and then add the headers for each month on top. I never make 1 year at a glance page, and since I pretty much only include birthdays in my future logs and I don't need that much space, my future log spread pretty much doubles as a year at a glance. So I taped these 2 columns and drew some flowers and painted leaves in the background. I love how these paintings look when you tape them, and they have these super clean edges, but this definitely can be done without taping them too. I drew some flowers to both of the columns and pretty much just filled the empty spaces with the green leaves without thinking of the placements too much. If you don't know what a future log is, it's a place where you can mark all your future events and tasks before you have done your monthly setups for the year. When you do make your bullet journal setups for each month, you can easily refer back to the spread and migrate your events to your weeklies and calendar. You can obviously always use 2 spreads if you need more space. I always include the next 12 months in my future log, so when I start my notebook in January like this time, I include months from January to December in that order, and when I start my second journal in July, I include months from July to June in that order. I always want to include all months of the year just so I can always have birthdays and events for the whole year with me. When I thought the paintings were done, I took off the tapes, but I still decided to darken some of the leaves. I started to write the headers for each month. I just used a simple thin cursive font to write the names of the months and later outlined them with the same white gel pen I used before. By the way, sorry for constantly having my hair in the frame. As you can see, the lettering didn't pop out from the page before adding the white outline, so I think it was a good choice to add. And now for my favorite part, which is creating the small calendars for each month. I sketched the calendars beforehand, and I would say you should do this too if you want to avoid mistakes as much as possible. I actually noticed only while editing this video that the small calendar I made for November is off-centered, and now it really frustrates me. I guess it's not too annoying since I didn't even notice it before editing this video, and I will definitely leave it like that. I don't want to spend any more time fixing it. Let's get to my YouTube spread. Last time I didn't add a full spread for YouTube and instead I did that for Instagram. Now that I've started to make more content on YouTube and I'm actually getting a bit of money here too, I wanted to make a full spread for it where I can plan everything, list my ideas, and track my subscribers. I've noticed I've really been needing a more structured full spread for my YouTube planning and tracking in my bullet journal. By the way, if you like to plan along, I know not many of you need a specific spread for YouTube, so you could definitely make this into your work or studying spread if that's something you need more. I started off by writing the YouTube header in the upper left corner with the same serif font. Then I drew some daisies behind it and painted the loose leaves as well. One thing I also found hard to get used to while I was creating pages in this notebook was the color of the pages and the dots. Obviously, I knew it would be more colder in tone since I've used Archer and Olive notebooks before, but after using a more yellowish toned paper, this was a huge change. Before I used my Mellow Days notebook, I always had these notebooks with crispy white paper, and honestly I thought I preferred them, but now that I've gotten used to the warmer toned pages, I think I prefer them instead. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm not using a Mellow Days notebook right now, first of all, I wanted a little change, and also they are currently not producing new notebooks, so I think it could be good to use an Archer and Olive notebook right now while I'm waiting for their new notebooks to release at some point next year, which I'm really excited about. Also, Mellow Days is an Archer and Olive EU stockist, so if you live in the EU and don't want to wait for a longer time to get your new Archer and Olive notebook, you can also purchase one from Mellow Days with my affiliate code DINA10. I used a big size 10 brush to first create the shape of the leaf and then used a small detail brush from Arteza to add some darker tones and the veins. Painting the center of the flower definitely was my favorite part of the painting. I think getting that little pop of color just makes this painting look so alive. And now we can move to the spread itself. I wanted to make a calendar where I could write all my planned YouTube videos for each month, but it has always been a problem for me that I can't really picture calendars in my head if they're not in top of each other, like in your phone calendar, for example. So separate small calendars wouldn't work for me. I decided to write the days of the month on top of each other here on the right side and drew every first day of the month with this little colored dot so I could immediately see which week started the new month. This style allowed me to write the days until August, and I think it's good so I can plan a lot in advance if I need to. There isn't much of writing space, but I'll see if this layout works for me, and if it doesn't, I'll have to come up with a new one in the future. I actually ended up gluing pieces of craft paper for my headers on the left page later, but at this point I only created some boxes for possible collabs and to-dos. I also wrote followers instead of subscribers. I don't understand why it has to be different in each platform. So I just made this super simple subscribers tracker in the lower left corner and then just made a border for the whole spread with rounded edges. Like I said, I came back to this spread later because I just felt like it needed some of that brown paper I added to all of my other spreads. The next spread is a really minimalistic and simple one. I wanted to make a full spread for any notes and things I wanted to write down. I only wrote notes in the upper left corner and made a border for the whole spread, and that was it. I decided not to add any paintings or details. Throughout this theme, I think I should have made the headers a bit smaller. Now it kinda looks too large in my opinion. But that was just a quick one, and next we move to my bucket list and goals pages. I just wanted to do a small bucket list where I listed some of the things I actually want to do or achieve next year, so I just cut a piece of this brown paper again where I wrote those items on top. I drew a circle for each item to cross off when it's done. I completely messed up the last circle, but I just ended up covering up the mistake in the end with a small piece of the same paper. I wrote Bucketlist in the top with a cursive font, and again I started to draw the flowers in the upper left corner. I wanted to also make some of the flowers on top of the brown paper, so I just outlined them first and went over those spots later with a white gouache. I made a goals page on the right side, so I thought it would create a nice balance if I made the header and paintings on the bottom right side of the page. I actually have never made a goals page in my notebook, but I decided to make it this time. I feel like now that I know where my life is going and I'm doing something I really enjoy, it's nice to have a page to write down what I want to achieve next year and where I want to go with, for example, this YouTube channel and my work. One thing I would really love to do this year is to create a Patreon where I could upload some extra tutorials and extra content you could view before everyone else. This has been on my mind for a while now, but I'm always that person who thinks about new things for such a long time, and making big decisions is always hard and takes time. Also, especially because it means that people would need to pay in order to see my content I upload there, my imposter syndrome really kicks in and it's hard to trust myself. But it's definitely my #1 thing I would love to do in the beginning of the next year, so I would love to know if there's some people who would be interested in that. I don't feel like I have to talk about my painting process that much since you've seen it multiple times by now, but I again painted some leaves in the background, and I also really like how the flowers look on the bucket list page with some of the petals being on top of the brown paper. It obviously doesn't have the same color as on the white paper, but it makes it look so much more interesting when some of the elements go on top of the paper too. Some things I added to my bucket list this time was first of all creating my Patreon page. I also added 30k on YouTube, which could be unrealistic, but if it doesn't happen, it's totally okay. I also want to celebrate Midsummer with friends next year and travel somewhere. By the way, I know my video is a super long one again, and overall I'm working quite a long time on my new bullet journal setup compared to some people who usually tend to have a more simple setup in their notebooks, but I want to say your setups don't have to take as long time as mine or be as detailed or have as many pages. The great thing about bullet journaling is that you can add whatever you want inside of it and not everything works for everyone. I know there could be some people that are starting their first bullet journals, and I would just encourage you to think, what are some of the things in your life you need some structure to, and what are those things that you always want to remember or have with you in your journal? There is never a universal answer to what you should include in your yearly setup, so even those of you who like recreating my work in your own notebooks, think about what you need. I created some boxes in the goals page and took my brown paper and got these thin stripes to glue for my headers. I really love this color scheme with the bright leaves and white flowers and the dark brown paper. I created the border for my spread again. I did this in my last bullet journal setup and I really loved how it looked, so obviously I had to do it here again. I always like to sketch even my headers beforehand, and now I didn't do it and the headers for the boxes are just all over the place, but it's fine. The spread in the end looks so fun and I love all the elements. I really hope I end up filling this up and completing at least some of my bucket list items and goals for this year. To the next page, I wanted to add my word of the year. I've never done this before, but I remember seeing my friends from the bullet journaling community do beautiful pages with their words of the year for 2021, so I wanted to do it for the next year as well. Even though I just talked about goals and things I want to achieve next year, something that's always the most important for me to remember throughout the year while also focusing on being productive is being kind to myself. It's easy for me to always remember those things I wasn't able to do or goals I wasn't able to achieve, but I don't always remember to be kind to myself or remember all the things I was able to do. So I thought the word kindness would remind me to be more forgiving towards myself and look at myself in a more kind way, the way I look at other people. By the way, I know the word is off-centered. I spent way too much time sketching it and just decided to leave it like this. I guess it's also kindness to just let yourself get away with small mistakes no one might even notice and don't matter at all. But as you can see, behind the word I just painted some more florals and leaves. This page doesn't have anything else except the word, so it's just a pretty page to look at. If you have a word chosen for the year, I would love to know what it is and why you chose that one. All of our lives are so different, so it would be nice to know what your focus for the upcoming year is. Now that I've created a lot of these new bullet journal setups in my notebooks, it's starting to always be more clear what pages I want to set up when I start my new journal. Some are just fun ones that I enjoy creating and using, and some are more useful. Even though I always create these pages, I definitely don't always fill my pages or necessarily need them. My needs always change and sometimes I need some spreads less. Some spreads I think I will always include in my setups are my future log, grid spacing, period tracker, and some kind of socials tracker, at least as long as I will upload videos and pictures on the internet. I actually think I'm going to add one more spread for all of my favorite movies and TV shows. Obviously that's going to happen off camera since you're seeing this video now, but that just came to my mind now that I've watched a lot of good TV shows and movies. I don't think I will decorate the pages anyway, but I think it would be fun to see all my favorite movies and TV shows on one spread. Some of my favorite TV shows I watched this year were White Lotus, What We Do in the Shadows, and Midnight Mass. Even though they're all completely different genres, I would highly recommend them to all of you. I truly loved watching all of them and I pretty much binge watched all of them in like 1 or 2 days. I know I didn't talk about the painting process a lot here, but I hope you still like the spread. I really love the composition even though it's a bit off-centered. The next and last spread I'm working on is completely identical to what I did last time. I included my period tracker and grid spacing cheat sheet here. The grid spacing page is here to help me make everything symmetrical when I'm working on my monthly setups. I always write the amount of dots on my page horizontally and vertically and then create lines to split my page to both directions in half, in thirds, quarters, and fifths. I can just easily flip to this page whenever I'm working on other pages so I can check how many dot spaces I have to reserve for my boxes or paintings, for example. I've seen some people like to make this into a separate paper so they can actually see the grid spacing guide next to their journal while they're working on their spreads, but this is enough for me. I also really need the spread this time since I have a new journal. Before I continue with this page, it's time to go back to my YouTube spread where I will add the brown paper to my boxes. I think doing this, the spread really came to life and I really love how the brown paper looks. Lastly, I just wrote the header for the boxes and went back to the last spread I'm working on. I made a little rectangle-shaped painting on the right bottom corner of my grid spacing spread. I wrote grid spacing on top, and for the word grid I used a serif font, and for spacing I used cursive. I worked on both of these pages at the same time just to spare some time. I wrote period tracker on top of the right page just like I did in my last bullet journal setup. I'm always having a hard time coming up with placements for paintings in this spread because both of these pages are pretty much filled with other elements, but I'm happy I was able to come up with this layout because it works so well and it's also nicely balanced. I know everyone has said this already pretty much every month, but I seriously can't imagine how it's possibly the time for a new year. Since the beginning of 2020, time has moved on a totally different pace. Somehow it's a lot faster, but at the same time a lot slower than normally, but it definitely doesn't feel like it's a time for a new bullet journal setup, or let alone January. I've really enjoyed making YouTube videos for the better half of this year, and I'm even more excited to continue creating new content and learning new things. I want to thank you for over 18,000 subscribers and your continued support on my videos. Filming videos and publishing them on YouTube has brought me so many happy moments in my life and more clarity on what I love doing and what I want to do in the future too. I've planned to post one painting tutorial video on YouTube every month, and as soon as I'm ready, do my Patreon page and post one extra painting tutorial in there, and just in general, start working on my videos more and create an actual schedule for myself. I'm starting to work on my January theme when this video is published, and I hope I can upload it to YouTube by the end of the Christmas week. If you want to see some of my other content and more close-up photos of my themes in the meantime, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Dina's Diary. For my period tracker, I created a grid for the next 6 months where I can add all of my symptoms. I made a key for this as well, just so I know what symbols to use for each thing, and also added a small note section if I have anything else to add throughout these next months. I'd say if you're a person with periods, you should definitely track your periods somehow, and you could immediately notice if there is some inconsistencies or patterns you should have in mind. There are obviously many apps available, but I like this form of tracking them. But that's it for my whole new bullet journal setup. I'm just quickly going to flip through all the pages I made here. I really hope you liked this theme as much as I did and enjoyed watching this video as always. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, leave a thumbs up and leave your favorite green emoji in the comments so I know you watched until the end. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye bye!